When we think of ancient Greece, one usually thinks of the great and famously divine beings like Poseidon or Zeus and his exploits. We think of the great wars that shaped the universe. We think of Ares and his thirst for battle, Athena and the founding of Athens, or you probably think of a hero or two, perhaps Theseus and Heracles and their labors. But very rarely do we see the origins of Greek mythology, or rather, what did they believe happened in the very beginning? How was the world built or born from their perspective? Usually, writers would gloss over these gray and messy areas and simply say that everything sprung from chaos and let's go from there. I mean, who could blame them? This particular part of Greek myth is pretty gray and messy. It is filled with contradictions, several different accounts, and no real unified agreement about what happened. So what was chaos? Chaos, as many agree, is the primordial soup, the first thing to ever exist. Everything and nothing coherent was in it. All matter and everything was jumbled together without existing and without order. Many sources, like the two most famous of modern Greek mythology writers, Edith Hamilton and her book Mythology, Timeless Tales of Gods and Heroes, and Thomas Bulfinch and his Mythology, do simply describe the beginning as the primordial soup. In my opinion, Hamilton put it best, saying, "First there was chaos, the vast, immeasurable abyss, outrageous as a sea, dark, wasteful, and wild." This quote comes in chapter 3, which means she decided to introduce the most famous figures of Greek myth, understandably so, before going into detail of how it all happened. Zeus and these other famous Olympians are actually the third generation of deities to rule over the heavens. Greek writers like Ovid describes chaos as a rude mass of nothing that was then divided into 4 elements. Cue Last Airbender music there. Though he refers to these 4 elements as earth, sea, heaven, and Tartarus, I still feel like Last Airbender music suits well with this. Another Greek writer, Hesiod, which will be used the most in this channel, though Homer and Plutarch will make several appearances as well, wrote in his Theogony, in the section of the cosmogony, or tale of the beginnings of time, "At the first, chaos came to be, but next, wide-bosomed earth, and dim Tartarus in the depth, and Eros, fairest among the deathless ones. From chaos came forth night, but of night were born Aether and Day. And earth first bore starry heaven, equal to herself, to cover her on every side, and to be an ever-sure abiding place for the blessed gods." Now, there is a lot to unpack here. First off, notice how he mentioned the gods, but not all of them were called by name, instead of by their element or what they represent. Gaia and the others essentially were pieced together from chaos. They built themselves into existence, or maybe to be more scientific about it, gravity eventually pushed them together. The 5 that emerged from the soup of chaos were Gaia, Tartarus, Eros, Erebus, and Nyx, though she was referred to as Black Night. Out of night then came the ether, and Hemera, or day. The last line talks about Gaia's first child, or her first creation, starry heaven, which is equal to herself. This is Uranos, who would become her consort and the father of the Titans. Each of these primordials, or deathless ones, represent either a plane of existence like earth, sky, or darkness, or an essential, unmovable piece of humanity, like love. Tartarus, in the deepest depths of the underworld, a plane or void where not even gods can escape from. It is where the worst of the worst in Greek stories are punished, such as Ixion, Tantalus, and Sisyphus, to name just a few. Eros is the incarnation of love, his Roman equivalent being the more famous Cupid. Some myths do put him as a child of Aphrodite, a being that, while she is put at the same level of the Olympians, had a completely unique way of coming into the world, but she deserves her own video. Next is Erebus, or the infinite void and blackness. He is the personification of darkness. If the Lovecraftian elder gods or great old ones ever have a home in Greek myth, I dare say it may be in the plane of Erebus. And Nyx is the personification of night. She and her consort Erebus are most famous for the children they had together. Some of these include Hypnos, or sleep, Thanatos, or death, the Hesperides, which will eventually guard the tree of the golden apples, the Moirai, or the three fates, Charon, the ferryman of the underworld, Rhamnusia, or Nemesis, which comes from the Greek word meaning to give what is due, Geras, the god of old age, and the river Styx, the major river in the underworld. Some of these beings play major roles in the story, and some of them are part of a group of gods called the Chthonic deities, or earth gods. Next is Ether and Hemera, who were also born from the union between Erebus and Nyx. The ether was the upper sky, the air that the gods breathed up above. Hemera was the day, and according to other traditions, they may have been born differently. All of it puts them as being born directly from chaos, while other traditions, like the Orphic traditions, we see them as children of Chronos and Ananke, two other primordial beings that represent time and necessity, respectively. Chronos is spelled differently than the Titan you may be thinking of. His name is with a CH, and he is portrayed as an old bearded man. He is quite literally Father Time, while Ananke is the personification of inevitability and compulsion. Essentially, she is the primordial goddess of destiny, if you will. And last but certainly not least is Gaia, or as the Romans called her, Terra Mater. She was the mother of all other things. Basically, all the major players, heroes, gods, and mortals can, in one way or another, trace their lineage back to Gaia. She not only bore Uranos, who will be expanded on when we discuss his children, the Titans, but she also gave birth to the primordial ocean, Pontus. Pontus was born directly from Gaia, and while we are on the topic of this primordial ocean, another primordial goddess is called Thalassa. She's a primordial being called the spirit of the sea. Many scholars agree that both beings, Pontus and Thalassa, may have had pre-Greek origins, coming from cultures or traditions that predate what we consider ancient Greece. The Aurea were born of Gaia as well, alongside Pontus. While Pontus was the sea, the Aurea were the mountains of the earth, the hills that the nymphs would eventually call home. Their Roman names is Montes, or Montes. Now, there is another tradition from ancient Greece that explains the origins of the world. I go into detail in another video, link up here somewhere, but this tradition talks about a snake and a dancing goddess called Eurynome. She and her consort Orphion come from the Orphic traditions. Both of them are primordial beings in their own way, and from them came everything else. We also see in these Orphic traditions Phanes, or Panis, who was the primordial being of procreation. Other notable primordials are Aklis and Aion. Aklis represents a mist of death. This being was said to be the precursor to chaos. Essentially, some traditions see Aklis as the nothingness before something happened. Aion, or Eon, personifies and represents boundless time. This is a time deity that, in a way, it's opposite to Chronos, who represents structured time. Think of Chronos as the structure of time with which we organize ourselves. Years, months, days, hours, minutes, our clocks. By the way, this is where we get the word chronometer from. And Aion is the opposite. Aion is the concept of time that can never be measured or reached. Infinite, boundless time. There are other primordial deities, but many of them barely have any mention in the myths. Physis is nature itself, from where we derive words like physics and philosophy. Hydros is one of the primordial waters. Hymeros represents tension in romance. He is part of this winged boy band that accompanies Aphrodite, along with Cupid, Porthos, and Anteros. I feel like I'm naming the musketeers. Then there is Moros, which means doom, and the Nesoi, which are deities of the islands of the world. These elder deities are manifestations of the ages. They are the first, the primes. Each of them represents an aspect of nature, time, or humanity that is undeniable. These are the primordials. Hey guys, I hope this video was helpful or at least entertaining. The primordials are pretty fascinating for me because for the ancient Greeks, these are literally the foundations of the universe. They're like the building blocks of everything we have and create from. The wild, untamed seas, the mountains, the unreachable skies beyond humanity. They are time and darkness and eternity. The primordials also represent this Greek idea of building on other traditions. Many of them, like I mentioned before, come from what would be earlier cultures and people that were either neighbors or eventually became the Greeks. Thank you so much for listening until the end of the video. I know it has been a while since I've posted a longer video. I am working on building a Greek myth. While I wanted to focus on shorter videos, I felt that many of these beings have so little information that I couldn't possibly make a video of each one. I placed them together, upped my editing game, I hope, and tried this out. Please let me know what you thought about this video down in the comments below. And please tell me which is your favorite of the primordials. I know someone has to mention Nyx somewhere. I read the House of Night series as well. I loved her there. I feel like many writers can take advantage of either the ambiguity or lack of information of these beings and really expand or create new myths and awesome stories surrounding them. If you can, take a look at my TikTok channel where I do top 5s in literature, history, myths, and special birthdays. Check out my bookish Instagram and my blog. I am currently working on a website. Please let me know what kind of information or myth-related material or content you find lacking. I have a few ideas, but it is always good to listen to those who are interested. Have a wonderful day and see you next time where we will discuss, you guessed it, the children of Gaia and the golden age of the Titans. Peace.